Good morning, everyone. In times of a crisis, it's not only events that shape the region, but how major powers interpret and respond to them. Today's strategic dialogue, The War in the Middle East, How India Sees the Crisis, invites us to step beyond the immediate headlines and explore perspective that is both influential and often under-examined. As a rising global power with deep economic, political, and strategic ties across the region, India's approach offers important insight into how the crisis may evolve and what it means in our region and international stability. And on behalf of the Trends Research and Advisory, I'm pleased to welcome to this discussion. And we look the speakers and we look forward to an ongoing and thought-provoking exchange. To begin, please welcome Ms. Noor Mutawwa, researcher at Trends Research and Advisory, to deliver her welcoming remarks.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this new session in the Trends Strategic Dialogue series, where we continue examining the implications of the recent Iran war and the overt Iranian attacks on the countries in the region, from multiple perspectives and analytical approaches. Amid the rapid transformation unfolding in the Middle East, the Iran war stands out as one of the most complex regional crises of our time, indeed of the past decade. Its repercussions extend far beyond the region, affecting global strategic balances and economic security, particularly in the light of the unprecedented attacks on the Gulf countries and the resulting economic pressure on global markets, as well as the erosion of key principles of the international law, including good neighborliness and prohibition of threat or use of force. With its military, political, security, and economic dimensions, this war is no longer a confined regional issue. It has evolved into multifaceted global concern where the interests of major powers intersect with those of regional actors. Consideration of regional stability now overlap with the global energy market, trade flows, and supply chains, clearly indicating that the post-war phase will bring significant shift in the pattern of alliance, partnership, and investments. From India's perspective, this crisis has been seen through a complex strategic lens that brings together energy security, the protection of economic interests, and the safety of Indian communities in the Gulf, alongside the need to maintain delicate balance in its relations with various regional actors, as well as strategic defense partnerships with some countries in the region. As one of the world's largest energy importers and a rising economic power with the expanding strategic ties to GCC states, India is directly affected by the consequences of this war, whether in terms of energy supply, stability, maritime security, or the protection of its trade and investment of interest, in addition to the safety of the citizens in the region. Some observers argue that New Delhi views this crisis as the test of its ability to sustain a multi-aligned foreign policy grounded in a strategic autonomy, allowing it to avoid sharp polarization while maintaining balanced relations with both Iran and the GCC states. However, escalating tensions are placing this balance under increasing strains, necessitating clearer policy positions to safeguard India's vital interest and preserve its strategic partnership in the Gulf. This economic dimension is particularly evident as India is directly impacted by the fluctuation in energy prices and disruption in supply chains, as well as the effects on the maritime trade especially through the Strait of Hormuz. This underscores the need for New Delhi to enhance economic resilience and deepen its strategic partnership, particularly with the GCC countries that are central to its energy, food, and investment security. Some analysts agree that India's reading of the crisis reflects a pragmatic, strategic realism that seeks to balance the protection of national interests with a contribution to regional stability, while recognizing that continued escalation could reshape the Middle East strategic environment in a way that directly affects India's growth trajectory. This is precisely why this strategic discussion is important, to explore the dimensions of the crisis through the perspective of both regional and international actors, foremost among them India, and to contribute to a deeper understanding of the transformation underway. Thank you for your presence. We look forward to a substantive discussion that enriches our understanding of this critical phase in the evolution of both the regional and international terms. Thank you.
Thank you, Noor. It's my pleasure to moderate this session. We will begin with our first speaker, Professor Gulshan, Jean Monnet Chair at the Center of European Studies. Professor, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Good morning to everyone, and thank you. This Trends Research and Advisory for this invitation and opportunity. I'm really delighted to be part of this discussion. And as Noor Al Mutawa has already kind of set the agenda, the context in which I think we are going to discuss today. Now, it's almost 2 months now, the war began. And details are, I think, known to everyone. I don't need to go into this. Since we are looking at the Indian perspective, obviously, India is a large country, large democratic country. There would be different interpretations, different ways things will be looked at. So I'll try to honestly try to put together how broadly I think India looks at this in 3 or 4 points. One is I think there is a understanding, there is a perception that to begin with, this is an unnecessary war. Means many of the things which are being discussed even today between Iran and US, Israel, and many others, those who are trying to help certain kind of reconciliation. Now, some of those discussions were already happening even when the war began. Whether it was a nuclear issue or other kind of issues, the long-term kind of security issues for the region, those could have been discussed without this war. Now, what actually this war has done is this has really pushed the region towards destruction. A lot of damage has been done. A lot of people have lost their life. So much in the infrastructure has been lost. Not just only in Iran but also across GCC countries. And so it means that's really, I mean, this is the war which actually was started by the US and Israel could have been avoided. But that's anyways history. So what obviously we are looking that, once this whole thing started, it has already created havoc in the energy market. Numbers are known to everyone. The price is, the crude is more than $100 today, and all kind of volatility, uncertainty, and of course the Strait of Hormuz is, more or less closed for the last 2 months now, which has created all kind of problems. And if you look at current IMF, projections, the global growth is down, is going to be less. And it's as the conflict is evolving, it's going to affect large number of economies, not just only in Asia, but also in Europe and other part of the world, which actually would create a lot of problems in the long run for everyone. Now, for India, obviously, I think the way India is it's a vulnerable country in that sense. India didn't have any role to play in this to begin with, in the sense, I mean, the way things unfolded, but the impact of this is being felt intensely in India. I mean, I think the Noor rightly mentioned, India has 200 billion trade in this region. And we have, 9, 10 million people of Indian origin live in this region. Similarly, our energy, is very much linked, very much dependent on GCC countries. Because the Strait of Hormuz is closed, so it's created a lot of problems in a sense in some of the sectors, and also the prices which is going to be felt because prices are high. At the moment, the government is kind of, controlling the prices, but they can't just keep doing forever. It means once the prices are up in the market, it's going to have inflationary pressure, impact on growth, etc. All those things, and of course, exports to the GCC region itself perhaps may have some problem. And as I think it was rightly mentioned, India is trying to, have a kind of a balanced position because, India has, in fact, all our India's strategic partners in this region. From the United States to Israel to, UAE to Saudi Arabia to Iran, all are, having very good economic, cultural, political relations with all of them. So for India, it's really a very tough choice. In a sense, you can't really take sides in a sense because there are, and India has even, condemned the kind of, unprovoked thing which has happened to the Gulf region by Iran, attack which happened to UAE, to Saudi Arabia, to other countries. So, but still, I mean, and now, in fact, when in the neighborhood, when, that there are difficulties in relations between India and Pakistan, which is known to everyone. And many in India were also not very comfortable when Pakistan started playing, some kind of role in bringing, the US and Iran for some kind of messaging, some kind of. But I think going beyond that, still, I think uh, any kind of step towards peace is welcomed in a sense. Whosoever is able to kind of push peace at this point of time, because this is impacting everyone and also impacting India. So that's the kind of, I think, situation in which India is. But one thing is also clear now. At the moment, it looks like that the first phase of this war is kind of over. Now we have some kind of ceasefire, also ceasefire, between Hezbollah and Israel in Lebanon. That's a good thing. But still, talks are off and on. I mean, all kind of, visits are taking place. I mean, the Iranian foreign minister was in Russia, and all those details. I think we all know. One at the moment, I think immediate three issues in which I think we are all concerned. One is extension of ceasefire. Second is the most important for everyone is opening of Strait of Hormuz because that's creating real problems for everyone. And the third is about the nuclear issue, in which, of course, the negotiations were there before, as I said, continue to be there. India, we only hope that they'll be able to find some kind of resolution to at least these immediate issues. Then, of course, there's also long-term issues. Because not that even if you have extension of ceasefire, some kind of resolution of nuclear issue, and even if the Strait of Hormuz is opened, now this has already created a new dynamics. We have seen the UAE is now out of OPEC. That will have its own implications in the long run for the oil market, for India's relations with these countries, and also how this is going to impact not oil market, oil prices, etc. So everybody has to watch carefully. But as I think things are going to unfold. Now, one thing is that there are very different fundamental differences between Iran and the United States, the way they actually see this whole thing there. Because the kind of role United States wants for itself in this region and also for Israel in this region. Obviously, Iran has a problem with that. Iran has a problem with the bases. Iran has the problem with the large role for Israel. So they continue to have that fundamental difference. Similarly, the way I think the United States, Israel, and also the GCC, other countries in the Gulf region, they would like to see Iran's role. They have a different perceptions about all of this. Now, how this war is going to unfold, we'll have to see how the new security and economic architecture is going to take place. It may take months, it may take years. Now how this phase, as I said, at the moment there's a bit, I would say, uh, stability, but you do not know whether it will go towards stability, or there could be again there is a possibility of you can have another phase of war that may also happen. So one has to see how these things go in the initial phases and how Iran comes out from this. I mean, so far they have shown some kind of resilience, whether they'll be able to continue with this kind of one, or they would, that everything will depend on, how things happen later on and what happened within Iran itself. Whether there is, collapse within Iran, or there is some kind of political changes, or the regime continues with more hardliners. So all kind of, dynamics within Iran itself will have its own role to play in the long run. So obviously, when things are going to settle, I'll just make the last point here, because I know the time is limited and others have to come in. As things are, we are seeing for the next months and years in which things are going to have the new security architecture, economic architecture. I think India, as an important country within the region, and now also the BRICS presidency this year, and here you also have even the members of the BRICS, particularly UAE, Saudi Arabia, Iran, all are members here. So India also has to perhaps, uh, you know, you know, play much more important role in the months to come. And also, as I said, are also important partners for India and the whole region. Stability of this region is also important for trade. For in fact, if you look at all the India's connectivity project, major one, International North-South Trade Corridor, India, Europe, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, all of them, of course, would also depend on the success of these projects, also will depend on stability and the kind of security and economic architecture in the months and years to come. So India would be watching carefully, and I think as and when it's required, I think India is, I think, ready to play a much larger role in any kind of new architecture in the years to come. At the moment, the things are unstable, so they're just watching carefully and just see the way things happen. Here we are now, but I'll be very happy to answer any question and going further to any specific area of discussion. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you, Professor, for your insightful contribution. You highlighted key dimensions of India's approach toward the crisis, particularly in balancing the strategic interest and regional stability. My question is, how exactly does India plan to manage this balance between its geopolitical interests and energy? Do you have any ideas?
Well, I mean, I think one is, the first thing is in any kind of, process which is going towards peaceful resolution, which is going towards more stability. I think India would be very happy to play that kind of role because, as you know, as I said, all players in this, in this at this point of time, they do have very close relationship with India, and even others, like with Russia, India still have very close partnership, a very special privileged partnership with Russia. And we are also, in fact, reasonably working relationship also with China as well. And also, as I said, particularly since India also has a major opportunity and responsibility through BRICS presidency this year. And so in the next couple of months, a lot of large number of meetings are taking place in India, where all the members of the BRICS countries would be here. So a lot of discussions at the higher level would be taking place, and I think, and all the BRICS countries, all the leaders at various levels, I think they are all concerned about the situation in Middle East at this point of time. So I'm sure all kind of things are happening, all kind of things would happen, and India, in a very mature and I would say in a manner in which, without antagonizing one party or the other, would like to really see the peaceful resolution of the current kind of situation in which the Strait of Hormuz is opened, because that's what actually the most important critical point at this point of time. And then later on, any kind of role, because there also has to be certain kind of reconstruction of certain activities happening, because some damage has been done in different parts of the Middle East, starting from Gaza to with Iran, and also in countries, and Indian industry, because they do have certain capacity, whether in refinery and others. I think they can also play both at the government level and also at the private level, in the months and years to come within this region as well. So India, and of course, large number of 9 to 10 million Indians, of course, they live there and they work at various levels within all these countries. So all those connections, I think India has those capacities and also major interest really for the stability and long term, I would say, economic viability and prosperity of this region. So India would continue to, watch these things very carefully, engage all these government. And as we have also seen engagements from, from the foreign minister, from the prime minister, with all leaders actually in this region, how they can really play wherever there's any possibility. This is what I think India would continue to do.
Thank you, Professor. We now move to our next speaker, Mr. Stefan Skallet, Scientific Advisor in the Global Sector at Trends Research and Advisory. We now turn to you.
Well, thank you, Abrar, for that. Also for your invitation to this very timely and important strategically event. By way of a framework, the relationship between the Gulf states and India is immensely important. We're discussing essentially trading nations who have been trading together for hundreds of years. And that relationship has evolved into one of multiple dimensions. Professor Gulshan mentioned energy security. So there's an energy relationship, very, very important to India and also to the Gulf region. There's a trade relationship, enormous amounts of trade going both ways. Of course, at the moment through the Straits, there is a blockade, but we anticipate and hope for a return to normality in that regard. And there's also, of course, a relationship of investment, of financial flows, and finally, the people, very important resource and asset, both to the Gulf and to India. So we're discussing a very deep relationship among nations who have historical ties and current important economic and strategic ties. And of course, the Gulf is a global energy pole, so significant in global terms. And India has a very strong voice in world affairs as a result of its demographic size, of its economic power and political influence. The relationship between the Gulf states and India can properly be described as one of a strategic relationship. Now, that's a term of art, as the participants know. It doesn't mean a superficial engagement, but it's a strategy relationship. So from a think tank perspective, and we've been doing this across regions in the various dialogues that we've held, we've looked at whether the relationship has stood the test of this current conflict. And in the case of India in particular, we see the energy security dimension is flourishing to the extent that it can. We know that through the Fujairah Habshan pipeline, India is, of course, lifting certain quantities of crude and hydrocarbons from that pipeline, thus contributing to the reliability of its energy supply. In terms of the critical supply chains that have been affected by the war, we've seen, of course, India's participation in the air bridges for food security, very large volumes of aircraft coming in to supply the Gulf, not only the UAE, but other parts of the Gulf with food. And also in terms of the logistical redeployment that has taken place with the ports, with the railways, with the pipelines fall into this to some degree, and with the air bridges, we see that India has participated very much in the success of those initiatives. Now, naturally, that cannot last forever. Resilience in trade and these short-term expedients which have been used very successfully to insulate the Gulf region from shocks cannot last for indefinitely, and as long as the strait remains blocked, there is a supply problem. I won't go into the broader energy market aspects because as Professor Gulshan said, we're all very much aware of that. So on the question of whether the India-Gulf states relationship has stood the test, the initial test of this initial and hopefully final phase of the war, the answer is a resounding yes, because we've seen it here, we've lived it here, and the Gulf and India have a basis for a relationship that they can now say has endured through the initial phase of a significant regional disruption for both the Gulf region and for India.
Mr. Stefan, building on your analysis, how do you foresee India's role evolving in the coming years in shaping regional and global energy and trade dynamics? And what key trends or shifts should we anticipate in this regard?
Right. Well, it's a very interesting question, Brian. And Professor Gulshan, he touched on this with his use of the word architecture. So there's a post-war architecture, and he used the word trends. And of course, there's a pre-war and there's a post-war condition to all the relationships. I think that we will certainly see a securitization of trade. This is quite clear. We will see a securitization of trade. I personally hope that it will be more on the side of a resilient trade rather than a securitized trade, because there is a difference in meaning. A securitized trade is much more inflexible, whereas a resilient trade is resilient to external shocks, but by its nature, much more open. I think we will see that. But I'll answer your question by reference to the Gulf's evolving role. Now, the Gulf, as it confronts a post-war and a post-oil, as it prepares for a post-oil future, it has to do a few things successfully. And I see a reinvention of the role of the Gulf states from being an energy pole to a global exporter and to a global connector. So connectivity is critically important, and the ability to export large amounts of manufactured and industrial goods is also critically important. So where does India come into that? I think that India is, of course, fundamental, along with other partner nations, to develop the governance around trade, but also as a reliable partner for these industrial supply chains that will be very, very necessary for the future. And they're complicated. They're complicated, and the supply chains move very quickly. And reliability in partners is everything for industrial development, for manufacturing, for eventual export. Not only the fact that the strait ought to be open as a non-negotiable condition, but also the reliability of your supply chain partner. So that's one thing. And the second thing is that, of course, the IMEC corridor, which is a giant outlet connecting the global south to the global north, or to Europe with the Middle East region in the middle. So this is again something which is, I think, strategically and economically non-negotiable. It's immensely important to develop the IMEC corridor, politics aside. My comments are analytical, not political. So it's immensely important to do that. And of course, India is one side of the IMEC, with the Middle East region and Europe being on the other side. So that corridor, again, is structured along the themes of connectivity and reliability and openness. I think that these are the key words that will influence and dictate India's and the Gulf's discourse in the post-war future. Thank you, Abraham.
Thank you for your remarks. We now move to our next speaker, Professor Viramani, Director and RBI Chair Professor at the Center for Development Studies. Professor, we invite you to share your remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Trends Research and Advisory, for this opportunity. So let me begin with a small paradox. So we know that India buys weapons from Israel. India also harbors Iranian naval ships in its ports, and India relies on the Gulf Arab countries for a third of its energy. And India has sent about 10 million of its citizens as workers, engineers, nurses, drivers, etc., to live and earn in the very region that is now on fire. So there is a big stake for India here. And yet, officially, India has not taken any strong position so far, except for condemning Iran's attack in the Gulf countries, and also a general call for peace. But I would argue that this position itself is very pragmatic and it's India's foreign policy. So to understand this position, we need to understand a concept that has been quietly governing India's foreign policy for the past several decades, what analysts call calibrated multi-alignment. So we are acting just according to that type of policies that we have been following for several decades. So India for decades maintained parallel and carefully insulated relationships with Iran, with the Gulf countries, with Israel, and also with the United States, all at the same time. This is not by luck or chance, this is by design. Rather than choosing sides, New Delhi cultivated each relationship separately, making sure that the problem in one lane did not contaminate the others. This was rooted in our post-colonial tradition of non-alignment, but under the present government, it became something more transactional. India moved closer to Israel as a defense and technology partner. It deepened ties with also Gulf countries for energy and investment, and it quietly somewhat distanced itself from Iran, partly under pressure from the Washington's sanction regime. So the operating principle is very clear: keep all relationships insulated from each other. The current crisis, however, is testing whether that is still possible. To appreciate how exposed India is, we need to understand the current status of India's Middle East relationship. On one side, India has practically zero energy imports from Iran since 2019. Only about 4,000 Indians nationals live in Iran today. On the other side, India is now by far Israel's largest weapons buyer, accounting for 1/3 of all Israeli foreign arms sales between 2020 and 24, with bilateral military transactions totaling about $8.6 billion. And on the very day the US-Israel strikes on Iran began in February 26, India's Prime Minister was in Tel Aviv, elevating the relationship to a new strategic partnership level. Meanwhile, India's ties with the Gulf countries have also deepened very steadily, driven by energy imports, remittance, and investment flows. So now it's a very difficult situation for India as the Strait of Hormuz is closed and India's stakes is very high and it has increased unexpectedly. So let me now turn to some economic consequences of this crisis for India and then what India sees as the way forward. So the economic consequences are very concrete. There are 4 core vulnerabilities in this crisis. One is a very clear energy issue. India is the world's 3rd largest crude oil importer. Over 53% of our crude comes from the Middle East, and 40% of that transit through Strait of Hormuz. When Iran closed the strait, the IMF called it the largest disruption to the global oil market history. And oil crossed $100 in a barrel, and it wasn't just petrol prices. 90% of India's LPG imports come from the region, and the shortage of the cooking supplies away from, and because of the shortage of the cooking supplies, it becomes an immediate domestic issue within India, with the government channeling supplies away from commercial use to households. So several establishments, restaurants have now closed. Some of them are finding it very difficult to operate. So it has a big livelihood issue also. A quarter of our fertilizer imports come from the same region, threatening farmers at precisely the moment when the sowing season is beginning. So it can affect agricultural productivity, food price, inflation. In multiple channels, this can work. The second vulnerability is the remittance. Nearly 10 million workers are there in Gulf. India received in 2025 alone $135 billion in total remittances. And that is the highest of any country in the world, and 3.5% of our GDP. And the Gulf region alone contributes about $51 billion of the total remittance that India is getting. So that is a problem, and many of the Indians are now returning home because of the crisis, because of job losses or safety concerns. That's an issue. From the balance of payment side, remittance falling means that has implications. Then there is also this India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor, which was already mentioned by previous speakers. And this was India's answer to the China's Belt and Road Initiative. And so this is a corridor linking Mumbai through Gulf to Europe. Now, it is the most ambitious piece of infrastructure diplomacy India had ever attempted. And the current crisis now creating problem, and it is becoming a difficult thing for India to materialize that. The fourth is the macroeconomic shock. The World Bank projected that India's GDP, India is still one of the fastest growing economies, in the large economies in the world, but the predictions have now come down from 7.6% to 6.6%, which is a large decline. 1% decline in GDP growth in actual dollar terms or rupee terms is quite big. So also the currency, Indian rupee has depreciated. It has depreciated 10% against dollar, which can create problems in terms of inflation control, because apart from the direct impact on inflation due to increase in oil prices, right now it is being controlled because government is entered and is not allowing prices to increase in the pumps, but this cannot continue forever. Fiscally, it is not going to be sustainable if the conflict continues. Fertilizer price may increase, therefore food price may also increase. All this will lead to problems on the inflation front. So rupee depreciation would also mean that the foreign inflation may spill over to India through trade. That also can happen. So these are some issues, but the government has responded and seeing all this with a $6.2 billion stabilization fund and excise duty rate cuts, etc. But this is not fiscally, it is not very sustainable to continue with that type of support. So some kind of solution is very much important, and it is in the interest of India like any other countries. But at the same time, I also see this crisis as an opportunity for India in a slightly different way. It is obviously in the interest of India to find a solution and see peace in this, because the stakes are very high. But India's own experiences in the past shows that whenever we faced a crisis, we also tried to use the crisis as an opportunity within the country. So every crisis accelerators choices that would otherwise take decades. If India now responds with strategic clarity, there are opportunities. So one of the opportunities which I think is there in energy independence through renewables. Here, India's renewable energy story is something very remarkable. By end 2025, India had installed 254 gigawatts of renewable capacity. And that is nearly triple it had in 2014. Solar alone crossed 100 gigawatt in January 25. India became the world's third largest solar producer. So renewable hit 50% of India's total installed electricity capacity 2025, half. And 5 years ahead of our Paris Agreement commitment, we could achieve that. So these are important achievements, and the current situation would accelerate this process, which has already begun. And I think there will be a lot of emphasis within India to think in terms of accelerating our investment and capacity in renewables to achieve energy independence. But it will take time. It is not a solution for the short term. So the short term, the only solution is peace. That I think in India, we understand it very well as a long run solution to these kind of problem, the vulnerability. I think government is seriously thinking about that. The other second opportunity is domestic reforms to increase productivity within India. Like whenever crisis happened, like for example, Trump tariff, the response in India was very positive. We went ahead and signed a free trade agreement with the European Union when Trump was, threatening India with a very high tariff. So that was a very positive step, So there are opportunities elsewhere, like there are pending reforms in certain areas, like, India's land market, labor market, then ease of doing business, then logistics costs, which are high. So reforms to improve these, so that to improve India's competitiveness and engage more in global value chains to exploit opportunities that may arise in terms of because of the free trade agreements that India has signed with some number of countries. India have signed in recent times free trade agreement with the European Union, United Kingdom, Gulf countries. We are negotiating. So New Zealand, in the other day, there was an agreement. There is also attempt to sign agreement with the United States and so on. So that is another area. The reforms to improve productivity, competitiveness, and global value chain participation. It's a time for India to think about serious reforms to achieve what is called resilience. Which resilience in India is not, as I understood now, is not blocking foreign investment or imports, but it is playing a strategic role in the global trade and value chains. So these are what I think India is doing. And one more opportunity is geographic diversification. India is acquiring oil equity stakes in other countries like Brazil, Colombia, and also in African markets that we are doing. And we have signed a critical mineral partnership agreement with Chile for lithium, with also other countries in like Australia and several African nations. These are essential minerals for EV and renewable energy transition. And also India's services exports hit a record level, $340 billion. And we have room to grow substantially there. Particularly, India positions itself as the world's back office for the AI economy. So the idea here is to make India indispensable. Right now, we are not in many areas in supply chains. So I think that is the way in which a country can take this as also an opportunity. So let me conclude with one point that so India's strategic silence is in this crisis not a hypocrisy, it is a dilemma, it's a genuine dilemma. Because we need American goodwill for technology and trade deals. We don't want Trump to impose 50% tariff on us. We need Israel also for defense technology. We need Gulf countries for oil and remittances. So all this, so balancing all these interests is extremely difficult. So that is what the dilemma that the country is facing. So the good news is that if you know, India has the foundations. Its macroeconomic fundamentals are strong. You know, if you look at inflation rate, it is within the tolerable limit, within the inflation target band that the government is thinking. Right now, there is no big threat, but it can't be guaranteed. Renewable energy trajectory is real. Manufacturing transformation is happening. Mobile phone exports, for example, India has become a third largest exporter of mobile phone, and you can see that type of dynamism taking place. Trade diplomacy is moving, and there is a demographic dividend. So these are the positive side. But at the same time, this is a crisis. What is happening is really painful for India also, like all other countries. And peace is what India is looking forward. And whoever brings that peace, I think, whether if it is Pakistan or any other country, I think largely India doesn't. It doesn't affect India. What is important at this time for us is achievement of peace. So and continuing with our very productive and valuable relationship with the Gulf countries is very, very crucial for the country.
Thank you, Professor, for your valuable insights and thorough remarks. In the interest of time, now we invite Mr. Manjeev Singh, former Indian ambassador to the EU and Nepal, to share his perspective. Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Abrar, and thank you to Trends to invite me. I'm delighted to see my colleagues there, and Stephen, thanks for your words. Abrar, let me get to the point of this. You heard my colleagues. Basically, they told you what India is doing. And of course, we are a large economy. We are today, whatever, fourth, fifth, sixth largest economy in the world. We will become the third largest economy. We will be indispensable for the world. When you are the world's largest country and you are one of the 3-4 largest economies in the world, you will remain indispensable. What we are trying to do is to build a greater degree of resilience. We are trying to do something, what you may say, shield ourselves from supply chain issues, etc., not dissimilar to the kind of stuff that we faced during COVID. We are facing a lot of problems. Let's be very crystal clear about it. Now, I want to say something to you, and let me be a little provocative. Professor Veeramani, you mentioned all the dilemmas. If you had those dilemmas, we should speak up exactly the way Abrar has been mentioning. Speak up and say the UAE is great and the Gulf countries are great and Iran is no good. No, we can't. So let me make this point. Please don't mind my thing. Abrar, the problem is the following. Everybody in India knows the importance of our relationship with the GCC country. Now, I'll ask you that question later on. What's happening in the GCC? That's a completely different subject altogether. That's a much more interesting subject. With the UAE, look at our relationship. You are among our top 3-4 trading partners. It's not just oil and security, it's investments, it's Indians who are there. It's a relationship that has built over time. I think the word strategic is not long enough for that. It's a relationship of a partnership and so on and so forth. You mentioned, Stephen, the question of connectivity. I don't think let me only talk about Etihad and Emirates. Let's not talk about other carriers from Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, etc. I don't think you run more flights to any other country than you do to India. So the question of the linkage is there. And India is firmly, let me say, friends, partners in everything. But, let me make a point to you. In the current context of what is happening, the population in India, generally speaking, is, of course, sympathetic to destruction of infrastructure and so on and so forth in the UAE, in the Gulf countries. Of course, we are. But let me make this point. People are sympathetic to Iran. They think it's a country that's been attacked. And whatever you may say, the fact of the matter is, people are noting the fact that why is this country being attacked? All the other factors are nobody says they aren't there. But countries play games, and countries have been in the business. After all, let me say something to you. The big growth that you have seen in your territory, the entire GCC, has happened from the 1970s onwards. Mr. Khomeini took power in 1979. So, the fact is, you all know how to deal with each other. You've done it for thousands of years. You are all experts. Are the Iranians not big investors in the UAE? Quietly and whichever way. But that's not the point. Fundamentally speaking, this is the big dilemma that the government of India faces. We are a democracy. That people generally say, what's happening? Now, what Professor Veeraswamy and Professor Sachdevan all said, we really say, stop the war. Let the war end. Peace is what we need. Let's do negotiation. To quote Prime Minister Modi, this is not the era of war. Let's do negotiation. Straits of Hormuz, critically important for India. LPG, we may say whatever else, but in India, over the last 10 years, we've mounted a massive program for cooking gas to be used by people, even in rural households. You know what is happening? The small guy selling samosas around the corner from our place has had to pack up, has had to go back to the village where he can burn firewood. It has a political dimension. So this is something that the government of India knows. And they're doing exactly what Professor Veeraswamy and Professor Sachdev said, building strategic resilience, looking at various things, etc. We stopped buying oil from Iran, global sanctions, very difficult to use the US dollar and so on and so forth. But, there are other facets to all of this. I want to make a simple point to you in answering the key question for which you have called us. And you have not, in my opinion, my colleagues, please don't mind it. You haven't called us to hear what we are doing ourselves. You've called us to hear from us what you think, the three of us think we will do in terms of what you believe is a kind of division. And so, Abrar, your question always been, how are you balancing things? My understanding is the following, to take on from what Stephen had mentioned. Look, our relationships with the UAE, I'm not going to the rest of the Gulf country, with the UAE are tremendous. It's not for nothing that the ideas of I2U2, the ideas of IMEC, etc. came about. It's not for nothing. The fact that you are our leading trading partner, that's a fact. That you have the largest number of people of Indian origin, that's a fact. Remittances are a fact. You are a big investor in the country. All these things are absolute facts. And so therefore, whichever way we look at it, no matter public sentiment, etc., and public sentiment is important in a democracy, the lean and the pragmatic lean of this government, of our government, has to be in the direction which fosters relationship with all of you. Now, none of us are mentioning Israel in this game. Come on, that's the key player in this whole war. You are, what should I say? You are sufferers. We are sufferers in a different sense, far away. Energy supply is being choked, other things happening. You are directly, because you're also getting hit. I don't want to go into who did it or who did. The Israelis. And this is an issue here. There's a kind of resonance of all this. In our sort of bureaucratic circles and diplomatic circles and strategic circles, you may keep saying big partnerships, etc. But people have a certain understanding. And these are understandings all over the world. People have similar kinds of understanding of why the country being founded. And so, therefore, these are the issues. But I have no doubt in my mind that as far as the UAE is concerned, it should be sanguine in one thing, that India is a partner, will remain a partner, and wants to be a partner, and will be a strong force to be supportive of you. Think of what happened at the UN resolution, which was piloted by Bahrain. This is something I don't think you need to worry much about. The question that India would say, look, we can't go to the extent that some people maybe in your country say, put an end to that country. That kind of stuff, let's leave it out. But be strong in your defense. Be strong with you. There should be absolutely no doubt in your mind. It's not just that's the strategic calculus in favor of that. It's because of the relationships that we have, and when we put both these things together. So I won't say much more. There's only 10 minutes left. Happy to take questions. But believe me, if you are feeding into policy circles, you can, in my understanding, and I'm speaking as a private individual, you can say that India is positively lean in our direction. Positive. Yes, they would want peace. They'd want Straits of Hormuz to open. Everybody, including the Iranians, to be able to do trade, etc., etc. Yes, that is between the two of you, your neighbors. We have issues with Pakistan. We ask you for our support, but we also realize that you need to have relations with them. So that's the nature of these. Having said all this, we'll be very strongly supportive of things that are good, I'd say, for the entire Gulf. But I will leave this question to both of you to answer. What's happening in the GCC? You're not showing incredible unanimity, not at all. And it's not just the OPEC decision by the UAE. So there are many things that people are thinking of. They're not very familiar. Believe me, all of us, our generation, has seen the GCC being pretty strong and together. But that's not the case what you're seeing in various ways. So we will think through it. But I would, from my personal position, assure you of India being strongly a friend and along with the UAE, insofar as the UAE's interests are concerned. That external business, look, end of war, ceasefire, opening of the Straits of Hormuz, everybody trading and doing other things. You compete in the world of trade, not by missiles and wars. And an external power, there are issues in terms of the way people look at it in our country. Let me stop.
Thank you, Mr. Manji, for your powerful note, and thank you very much for your contribution. As we come to the end of the session, I'd like to invite Ms. Moza Marzouki, Senior Researcher at Trends Research and Advisory, to deliver the closing remarks and recommendations.
Thank you, Abrar. Ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude this in-depth discussion on India's perspective on the war in the Middle East, the importance of this viewpoint becomes clear in understanding the trajectory of the crisis and reshaping of regional and international dynamics in the post-war phase. The discussions have highlighted that we are at a vital moment that is redrawing maps of influence and redefining relationships among regional and global powers, including India, and even shaping traditional notions of allies and adversaries. India, as a rising power, is seeking to strengthen its position through engagement with GCC partners in a manner that safeguards mutual interests. It has also become evident that this crisis extends beyond its immediate military and political dimensions to encompass broader economic and security implications that transcend borders, affecting market stability, energy security, and global supply chains. These are issues that directly impact India's core interests. In this context, India emerges not only as a stakeholder affected by the crisis, but also as an actor with growing influence through its economic weight, its strategic partnerships with GCC countries, and its expanding role in multilateral initiatives. Building on this, a number of forward-looking directions can be outlined as follows. First, developing a model of multi-track diplomacy that integrates official channels with economic diplomacy and leverages the role of India's vital sectors, a private sector, in supporting regional stability. Second, strengthening energy security through joint investments with GCC partners across the energy value chain, including refining, strategic storage, and green hydrogen, rather than relying solely on traditional imports. Third, advancing initiatives to secure maritime routes in cooperation with GCC partners, including early warning mechanisms and the protection of vital supply chains. Fourth, expanding India's role in quiet diplomacy, drawing on its balanced relations with various parties to enhance its position as a responsible actor in crisis management. Fifth, building advanced economic resilience by diversifying import sources, localizing critical industries, and enhancing logistical connectivity with the GCC through new economic corridors. In conclusion, with this crisis presents significant challenges, it also creates an opportunity for India to redefine its role in the Middle East in a more effective and strategic manner, leveraging its balanced relations with GCC states and its position as a rising economic power. The central challenge remains India's ability to transform this complex geopolitical moment into an opportunity to strengthen its strategic security and enhance its role as a reliable partner in regional stability. And with that, I go back to you, Abrar, to conclude.
Thank you, Moza. On behalf of the Trends Research and Advisory, I'd like to extend our sincere gratitude to our distinguished speakers for enriching the session with their insightful perspective and meaningful contributions. We look forward to welcome you again in our upcoming dialogues. Thank you for your time and engagement. Wishing you a pleasant day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.